What if money didn't exist? Imagine for a moment a world completely unbound by the pursuit, presence, or necessity of money. No glittering currencies, no coins jingling in pockets, no credit cards or bank accounts, no striving for higher salaries, no counting the days until payday. Instead, a society built on fundamentally different motivations, a world where the invisible web that money has woven through daily existence vanishes, leaving behind new questions, new structures, and a radically reimagined way of life. Without money, much that we take for granted disappears. No price tags stare at us from store windows. Houses, cars, clothes, and food are no longer weighed against our paychecks, no longer translating into symbols of success or struggle. Instead, imagine people seeking out goods and services not through financial exchange, but through alternative systems informed by communal needs, mutual obligations, shared priorities, and perhaps even a wholly different definition of value itself. The first and most obvious shift would be the sudden erasure of all transactions as we know them. How then would people acquire food, housing, clothing, or anything else they need? To answer that, it helps to look back through the pages of history and forward into the realm of possibility. In early human societies, long before minted coins or printed bills, people relied on collective living, sharing, and the barter system. In such systems, a person might exchange a tool for food or trade labor for shelter, relying on immediate needs and direct relationships. If money disappeared today and the world attempted to return to a barter system, profound complexities would emerge. The modern economy is far more intricate than ancient barter could likely sustain. You can't easily trade a medical consultation for a bushel of potatoes or a day's plumbing for a new smartphone. The multitude of goods and services, along with the specialization of labor, makes barter alone inefficient. The double coincidence of wants, that is, finding someone who not only has what you need, but who also needs what you have at that moment, is a staggering challenge in a society of billions. Thus, new systems would have to emerge, and quickly. Some might suggest a shift toward a resource-based economy, where goods and services are produced and distributed based on need, capacity, and sustainability, determined perhaps through the consensus or rational planning of communities. In this world, individuals would contribute according to their abilities and receive according to their needs. Imagine communities where people collectively cultivate food, manufacture goods, construct dwellings, and share the output, not for personal gain, but for mutual benefit. Other possibilities include intricate webs of mutual obligation, networks built on trust, reputation, and well-documented reciprocity. Digital technology might facilitate these microeconomies, recording contributions and needs, matching skill sets, and distributing resources not according to cash flow, but through algorithmic consensus or collective decision-making. But the implications would be personal, as much as societal. Consider once ordinary questions. Why do people get up and go to work each day? For many, the answer is simple. Money, the means to survive and acquire comforts. Take away money, and the motivation landscape transforms. Some individuals who once dreaded their jobs might find the drudge unnecessary, seeking fulfillment elsewhere. Others, drawn by genuine belief in their labor, might double down. Scientists striving to cure diseases, educators passionate about nurturing young minds, artists eager to create, not for profit, but for the glory of discovery, learning, or joy. This unshackling of labor from monetary reward could kindle a renaissance in creativity, service, and collaboration. With basic needs decoupled from income, people might pursue vocations or callings for love, not for livelihood. The hidden poet becomes visible. The would-be inventor finally finds time to tinker. The community garden grows as more hands willingly join. Conversely, certain jobs, especially those often designated as dirty, dangerous, or dull, might become difficult to fill. If no one need labor for a paycheck, what motivates someone to collect waste, scrub sewage pipes, or mine minerals in hazardous conditions? Society would need to reimagine incentives, perhaps through communal recognition, shared responsibility, or alternating labor systems where everyone pitches in for less desired tasks upholding the social fabric through collective effort. With money gone, crime motivated by greed or desperation might dwindle. Petty theft, white-collar crime, financial scams, bribery, corruption, each would lose their grip. But other new challenges might arise. How to ensure fairness in the distribution of scarce goods? How to prevent the hoarding of valued resources? Who decides what is produced and how it is shared? Would jealousy and rivalry be laid to rest? Or would they take on new forms, rooted in status, skill, or access? The disappearance of money would also ripple through institutions. Banks, stock markets, insurance agencies, loan officers, all would vanish or reinvent themselves beyond recognition. Governments would still need to coordinate collective action, maintain infrastructure, develop policy, and respond to crises, but without the lever of fiscal tools. Taxation would be meaningless. Public spending would turn into a question of allocating real resources, perhaps guided by democratic deliberation, automated planning, or other, as yet undeveloped mechanisms. Personal finance, too, would dissolve in its usual form. Gone would be budgeting apps, balances, and bills. Retirement planning, investment portfolios, lottery tickets, inheritance squabbles, all would fade into memory. Instead, people might focus on planning their lives around community goals, periods of contribution, education, creative projects, or rest. Education itself would transform. Gone would be the expenses of tuition and the scramble for scholarships. With learning untethered from financial cost and career calculus, education could focus on unlocking potential, fostering love of learning, and equipping people to serve the common good in whatever ways they find meaningful. Inequality, that ancient and stubborn scar, might heal in fascinating ways, or resurface with new faces. Wealth, so long measured by accumulated currency, would need redefining. Certain forms of privilege might persist. People living in resource-rich regions, those blessed with rare skills, or the socially connected might garner influence and comfort. Yet with basic needs guaranteed for all, with health care, shelter, and sustenance distributed not by purse, but by plan, the most grinding forms of poverty would likely vanish. Global relations would change too. International trade, long dominated by currency exchange, would require new frameworks. Barter on a worldwide scale, agreements to share technology or resources, or collaborative efforts to solve problems like environmental degradation and pandemics. Nations might shift focus from GDP growth to well-being, sustainability, or collective security. But could modern society function without the lubricating effect of money? Many philosophers and researchers point to both enduring pitfalls and inspiring possibilities. On one hand, the abstractions made possible by money, the ability to defer consumption, to pool risk, to invest in the distant future, might be harder to replicate. Projects requiring coordination over vast distances or generations, building scientific infrastructure, undertaking environmental restoration, could flounder if handled only through spontaneous cooperation or barter. On the other hand, new technologies, such as artificial intelligence, could help match needs to capabilities, anticipate shortages, and manage complex logistics without traditional profit incentives. Culture, too, would transform. Art, once shaped both by the search for patrons and by the lure of financial gain, could move in untamed directions. Some might argue there would be less incentive to innovate, while others would insist that pure curiosity, pride, or a desire to leave a legacy would accomplish even more without commercial restraint. The concept of luxury could shift, perhaps no longer tied to the rarest materials or the highest prices, but to uniqueness, personal achievement, or shared experience. The day-to-day texture of life would become altered in subtle and sweeping ways. People would inhabit a world free of debt. The sleepless nights worrying about overdue bills, the stress of stretching dollars to pay rent or buy food, would disappear. No one would lose their home because they couldn't pay a mortgage. No young person would be blocked from a dream by the price of training. Families would be able to care for elders or children without choosing between compassion and a paycheck. Our vocabulary, too, would change. "You can't afford it" would fade from everyday speech. So would wage, fee, salary, expensive, and cheap. Instead, language would grow around shared responsibility, mutual need, stewardship, and contribution. Life plans would center not on maximizing earnings, but on exploring interests, helping others, and creating beauty, balance, and harmony. But challenges and disagreements would remain. People's desires could outstrip available resources. How would societies decide who can have what, or who contributes what work? Would individuals really find joy in satisfying basic wants, or would new forms of status-seeking erupt based on talent, influence, or what is now called cultural capital? History offers examples both hopeful and cautionary, from monastic communes and utopian experiments to darker stories where utopian dreams slid into hierarchy and control. Over time, societies might experiment with rotating work, encouraging people to take turns with more difficult or undesirable labor. New forms of recognition and appreciation might arise, rewarding those who go above and beyond, not with currency, but with respect, honor, or collective gratitude. Technology, especially automation and artificial intelligence, could ease burdensome tasks, freeing more people to engage in creative, caring, or constructive work. In such a world, great problems that once seemed insurmountable for lack of money, ending homelessness, feeding the hungry, providing universal medical care, nurturing the earth, might finally meet their solution, not because nations found more money, but because people finally let go of money as the sole mediator of possibility. The end of money would not mean the end of ambition or of progress. The next great explorers might embark not for fame or riches, but for knowledge, wonder, or the joy of discovery. Artists and musicians would create because they are compelled to express, reflect, and connect. Parents would raise children unburdened by financial fear. Elders could age with dignity, supported by communities that value all members not for their income, but for their lives and stories. Still, there would be loss as well. For centuries, money has provided a universal language, a way to compare, decide, and record value, to signal priorities, and to make complex societies function. Its disappearance would demand a total rewiring of collective life. Mistakes and missteps would be inevitable. Some would mourn the loss of clear incentives, structure, and simplicity. Others would celebrate newfound liberation, creativity, and equity. Over generations, new rituals and norms would take root. Holidays might no longer focus on gifts bought and exchanged, but on time spent together, on collective achievement, gratitude, or remembrance. Cities, no longer divided by wealth, might transform, rethinking how neighborhoods are shaped and how people move, interact, and live together. The family farm would return, not out of economic necessity, but from joy of the land, the delight of co-creation. Communities might revive ancient ceremonies, lost arts, or forgotten wisdom, as material necessity loosened its grip on life and hearts. People might travel for learning and experience, not just for work. Human connection could deepen, as competition for scarce resources gave way to a sense of shared destiny and mutual support. The environment, long sacrificed for profit, could benefit profoundly. With money no longer driving the relentless extraction of minerals, deforestation, overfishing, and pollution, societies might set new priorities based on long-term survival, beauty, and respect for all forms of life. Energy could be allocated for sustainability, not for short-term gain. Of course, not all problems would melt away. Prejudice, rivalry, and misunderstanding are not products of money alone. But with needs met and desperation diminished, perhaps the stage would be set for new conversations and a deeper reconciliation with the lingering hurts and hopes that shape humanity. Over time, schools, families, and cultural guides would impart new lessons to children, not about managing allowances or saving for a rainy day, but about contribution, stewardship, empathy, and co-creation. The stories passed from generation to generation would shift in theme, from rags to riches tales to sagas of courage, kindness, creativity, and care. Eventually, the very notion of work might dissolve, or at least become unrecognizable from today's perspective. Life would turn into a vast, intricate collaboration, millions working together not in pursuit of profit, but to satisfy shared needs, explore new ideas, and create beauty, meaning, and joy. As the centuries rolled on, if humanity could master the art of giving and receiving, of caring for each member, if people could find fulfillment not in having, but in being, doing, and becoming, then the disappearance of money would not be seen as a loss, but as a leap towards something richer, deeper, and more humane. In the end, the disappearance of money would not abolish trade, ambition, or desire. Instead, it would shift the foundations of human life, from what one owns to what one shares, from the solitary climb for wealth to the collective journey for well-being. Such a change, imagined by philosophers and dreamers across history, would take more than new rules or technologies. It would require new hearts, new habits, and above all, a new vision of what it means to thrive, not as individuals, but as a world, together. In that world, alongside the loss of monetary metrics, there is the birth of other ways of measuring life. A person's worth would be summed up not in net assets or annual earnings, but in kindness given, in problems solved, in laughter sparked, in suffering eased. People might introduce themselves by what they create, care about, and contribute. Plans and milestones would be measured in experiences, relationships, learning, and shared achievements. The very shape of history would shift. Wars for wealth and control might give way, or at least diminish, as the old incentives fade. Ideals that long seemed naive, the abolition of hunger, the end of homelessness, the flourishing of cooperation over competition, suddenly grow possible, if not easy. Yet caution abides. New dangers would arise, and vigilance would remain essential. Human nature, after all, is complex, resilient, and not easily remade. Through mistakes and experiments, people would learn to balance self-interest with the common good, to celebrate individuality while nurturing interconnectedness. New rituals, celebrations, and common purposes would emerge, rooted not in accumulating things, but in building meaning, beauty, and belonging. The world without money would not be a utopia nor a dystopia, but a new chapter, a new way of organizing ourselves, fraught with challenge and possibility. It would demand new skills, compassion, cooperation, conflict resolution, listening, and creativity. It would awaken ancient wisdom, the importance of reciprocity, the fulfillment found in service, the joy of discovery, not for profit, but for the sheer adventure of being alive. Ultimately, the experiment would be ongoing. Faced with new opportunities and challenges, societies would adapt, learn, and grow. Not all problems would vanish, but many could become easier to solve with minds and hearts unbound by scarcity and competition. When the history books of the future are written, perhaps they will look back and see money not as the apex of civilization, but as one chapter in a longer, nobler story, a story ultimately about how people learn to live, love, and create together, valuing themselves and each other for more than what could be bought or sold. This, then, is the world that might emerge if money ceased to exist. A world of challenges, experiments, and above all, new beginnings. A world where the question at the heart of life becomes not, what can I afford? But what can we build together? Thank you for watching the video. What do you think about today's topic? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and share the video to support the channel. Thanks again, and see you in the next video.